Simulation Happy Hour acknowledges the land and the waters from which you are listening today. Welcome to Simulation Happy Hour. Sit back, relax, and let's talk about all things sim. Hi, welcome to another episode of Simulation Happy Hour. It is just Kerry and I today. How are you, Kerry?
Yes, good morning, Mel, and how are you?
I'm good. Summer is here in full force
I don't know if
already.
it's good or bad.
Hot already. So it's you and I, and we're going to talk about QSAFe today because we're both involved in the development of something called QSAFe. So we're going to have a chat about it. But I guess, first of all, Kerry, what is QSAFe?
Great question. QSAFe actually stands for Quality Simulation Assurance Framework. And in essence, it's a supportive framework that we've designed with a lot of support and consideration of other standards that individuals can follow to develop and design robust simulations. But it's not just about the design, it's also a framework that individuals can use to benchmark their existing simulation activities to both simulation standards and professional standards of practice. So it's a great document also for auditing processes, for curriculum. So there's lots to it. Yeah. So
Brilliant.
I'm going to ask you then, Mel, how is this different to other simulation frameworks or quality simulation standards that exist? How is this different?
Thanks, Kerry. So what we did with this is we fully recognise existing simulation standards. So the healthcare simulations of best practice out of Anaxel in North America, and also the ASPE out of the UK. So there are evidence-based standards, simulation standards that exist, and they're really good. What we were finding, though, was, I guess, particularly, well, we're both in higher education. And so often people get tapped on the shoulder to say you're teaching in the simulation lab or you're now in charge of a simulation-based unit. And they haven't had the training, or they've had in the past, but not a lot of support in designing robust simulations. So what we thought was, well, when we also put the standards in front of people, like there are 10 standards and the standards are thorough, but they all intertwine and interconnect. And it can take a lot of work and knowledge to unpack those and really make them tangible to operationalize. So we just wanted to take that great work and simplify it. And also, things that are developed in the Northern Hemisphere don't always translate for us in the Southern Hemisphere. It's different context, different, I guess, sociocultural backgrounds. And so we just wanted to simplify and to make it contextualized for our kind of simulation environment. So we did a lot of literature reviews, and some of those published. We did ones on the application of the Anaxel standards. Lots and lots of people reference the standards, but what we found was very few people tangibly explain how they've used the standards to design and develop their simulation. So we thought we would help that process and develop this. And you were there. We did a nominal group technique, which is get experts together, which we did across Australia and New Zealand, and just go round and around and nut out and distill down, the evidence and people's expertise down to key things. We had a day to go through the 10 Anaxel standards. We got to hour 6 and we were still on the design standard. And we just had to pause and go, why are we after 6 hours still on the design standard? And it was a bit of an aha moment. And we were like, oh my gosh, because absolutely everything in all the standards is relevant when you're designing. Like when you're designing, you got to think about evaluation. When you're designing, you got to think about you should be thinking about how I'm going to prepare my learners for this. How am I going to prepare my teaching staff for this? What do I need in place? So fundamentally, we thought we would then design a framework that supported simulation design.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And it has been a fantastic process. And it was also identified, for us in this process of really evaluating other standards and documentation, that we needed something that would be very much aligned to the Australian context and something that would be fairly easy to follow. If I'm somebody coming into simulation as a fairly new academic or new in the healthcare sector and I've just taken on simulation, then
Mm-hmm.
this is a really great resource. So, yeah, Mel, I might actually tell our audience then what the elements are
Do
of those,
please.
those five basic elements. So, the first one we talk about is simulation modalities and methodologies, and I'll speak about that in a moment. Then there's consultation and co-design, where we talk with all the key players who might be really relevant to the content of that simulation. So, for example, if I'm got simulation portfolio in a healthcare facility and I'm doing some simulation for cardiac nurses, then of course I'm going to be talking with the cardiac educator. I might be talking with the NUM. I'm going to be talking with people who see why do we need to develop this particular topic for this particular audience. So it is about thinking who we need to talk to. It is also number three. So, number one, simulation modalities and methodologies. Number two, consultation and co design. Number three is curriculum alignment and where simulation fits according to our levels of learners and the best type of modality or method to use. Four is faculty preparation for the delivery, and five is learner preparation for delivery. So let's just go through one of them, and simulation modality and methodology, Mel. So if we looked
Mm.
at what is the actual difference with that, and if I was to perhaps go and randomly ask some new players into simulation, what's the difference? They may not necessarily understand, but this resource helps put all of that into context. So in essence, a mode of simulation is that type of simulation you're delivering, whether we're doing a mannequin, whether we're doing part task trainers. So it is the actual mode. Whereas the method refers to how that mode will be delivered. For example, a pause and discuss, a rapid cycle, whether it be tag team, whether it be so. There's different ones. So and let's look at some of them. We'll break down some of them. Modalities that we can brainstorm: desktop simulation, case-based learning, mannequin-based, task trainers, hybrids, mixed simulation, role play, online computer-based simulation, telesimulation, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, holograms, immersive rooms, caves, commercially produced. So there are a variety there. And this resource, the people who are using this can click on to some of those areas and it gives them a great definition or an explanation or even a link of what examples might be. The methods are really important in terms of, as we just said, the level of learner that we're dealing with. So they could be immersive. They could be a pause, discuss and reflect. It could be a procedural training, a rapid cycle, deliberate practice, a tag team, a skill rehearsal, an in situ, a process simulation, a team rehearsal, a distance simulation, etc. And let's give an example. So I'm an educator who is about to teach. I'll use the university sector for the moment. I've got first year students, and I'm teaching them vital signs. I want them to be able to manually use the equipment. I want them to understand what they're doing and what they're listening for with the blood pressure, etc., etc. So in that type of simulation, I might do a basic standard, might be a role play where we've got one person who is in the bed and I'm going to undertake their vital signs. I might get that person to I'm going to use the introduction, I'm going to do the hand hygiene, I'm going to do all of that as I go through. But the method that I'm going to use as I deliver it is basically a skill rehearsal or even a standard demonstration where then we might pause, we might then discuss, we then might reflect. So, for example, as I take the blood pressure, I might get the learners to think about, I've got this cuff. How do I decide what is the best size for this particular patient? We then give the demonstration. Then we're going to discuss, well, what would happen if we use the smaller one? So it's it's very much that first year level, as opposed to, I'm going to use the same topic, vital signs, recognizing and responding to deterioration, and the context might be the sepsis patient. Here it might be, the modality might be a case-based situation. We could be using role play, we could be using a combination. But then when we are going into that, it might be a tag team type simulation where, the learners have to pause. They also have to get into it. They have to think about what the consequences are if they didn't pick up on those types of things. So I guess what this does is, even with, and I'm just going on here about the modalities and the methods, it just allows us to really break up and think about what's elements of simulation that we really need to stop and think about in order to make sure that we are addressing our learners. So, for example, that first year scenario I just gave you, if I was not to give any rehearsal, not to give any demonstration, and I said to a group of first year students, you are going to do your vital signs, and here I'm going to give you really quite a complex scenario, and you've got to work your way through it. What we're going to see is really dissatisfied learners at the end of it. There'll be a lot of, how do they do that? How do I do this? We waste time in the simulation. And we've got a level of, as I said, dissatisfaction, as well as potential trauma or concerns that those learners are going to leave behind after the sim. So, yeah, that's just one example of the
Yeah.
modalities and methodology section of this framework.
But it's like, even at the start, so modalities and methodologies are at the start. The rest of the tool is also about getting people to think as they go through it. Is that the right method and modality? So, we tend to tick mannequin based and immersive, but if that was just, say, then we want to do a look after an Indigenous patient, well, then we get to the consultation and co-design. And
Yeah, and
so
so
there's a whole resource there of considerations. And in the handbook, associated handbook, it explains not only what consultation and co-design is, but why it's important. And so you might go through that process and discover that's a completely inappropriate mode and method and go back and change it. So the
and
whole, I guess, the elements are to get you thinking about, and it's a bit of a needs analysis, really, isn't it?
absolutely. And what this also does is makes us think about, if we're using simulation and then we need to actually review what we've done for the next cohort. It might be our responsibility as nursing academics to review our content at the end of each semester. and look at the feedback. Well, actually, have a look at this framework. Have I actually addressed each of these modes? And that
Yeah.
consultation includes just your industry representation. It's like,
Yes.
hey guys, what do you think you really want of first year students when they're out on practice? Where should they be at? It's that content designers, it's the curriculum experts, it's also the logistics and resources that are available in terms of doing your methodology or your modality. Have I actually got the resources to be able to do it? And also the evaluation and research. So don't forget the importance of looking to what the research is saying about, is this the best mode or modality for a method or modality for this particular type of simulation. So
Yeah.
again, this resource tells us, this great framework allows us to go through all of that. So yeah, and then I guess the other side of things is the risk assessments, and
Mm.
you might ask me the next question you had in mind. I know what this one is, Mel.
So I guess, whenever we talk to you, Kerry, about simulation, you're very focused, and rightly so, on the psychological safety of our learners.
Yeah.
So how does this framework support that?
Look, it makes us think about when we're again designing any simulation. The number one thing is that, have we prepared our learners sufficiently? And have we prepared the people who are delivering those simulations? And so, quite often, we know, and again, I don't want to harp on about the tertiary sector, but often in the clinical laboratory context, we find ourselves where clinicians come in and do the teaching. And often, or not often, I'm going to generalize there. So there may be times where they're not actually prepared or have had the education for the delivery of the simulation. Here's the simulation, this is what you have to do. One of the other things that we want to remove in the ideas of simulation is that fear factor for students. You've got to really test them. If we upload our learners with preparation before they go into a simulation, A, that level of confidence, B, the level of knowledge that they know they need to be prepared for, B, that they've got a bit of an idea of what this simulation is going to be about, we see the positiveness of learning. Then we don't see the fear and the anxiety because of, I don't know, or I'm going to potentially be stood up in front of my peers. And that's also where the or the preparation of the educator who is delivering those simulations. What is it that they need to know? How do we gauge those learners? How do we bring the learners in and out? What is the content level that I need to give? How do I run this simulation? Is it a pause and discuss, as opposed to, oh, I'm just delivering all of this information? So I guess what I'm saying is that the physical risks need to be considered, the cultural safety risks, the psychological risk, and also that negative learning risk. This framework goes through those elements of what we need to consider, because at the end of the day, we want learners to be coming to simulation with a level of, I love simulation in that I gain so much from it. If we see individuals of fearing simulation because of previous experience that have been so negative, it's like that caveman that sees the lion or the dinosaur coming towards them, they're going to run, as opposed to, no, this, I've dealt with this before. I know how to navigate through it. And this is going to be a really positive experience. So negativity breeds fear and a blockage of what I can't learn from this, as opposed to, this is going to be a positive experience. I've learnt from it before. I've got a great facilitator that can help me move through this. I know the information I need to know. I trust the facilitator will work with my learners, and we go from there.
Great. Yeah, and I think that was the difference. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, because we had, I guess, a bunch of experts across Australia and New Zealand, but we didn't really want to take just our word for it. So we after we drafted the tool and the handbook, we sent it out to nursing schools across Australia and New Zealand to get feedback. And so we achieved some awesome feedback. So they use the tool to benchmark existing activities. And we're going to publish these results, but fundamentally the feedback was the tool was really supportive. It helped them, particularly, there was a lot of feedback around modalities and methodologies and the terminologies, and often a lot of different terms are used for the same thing, and there was a lot of confusion, and often things that are termed a particular way in other countries are not the terminologies we use here. So they found that really beneficial to have terminologies and to understand definitions. And in the handbook, we link out to key resources too, to simulation dictionary and things like that. But we kind of contextualize it to our context. The other thing too was around like the risk factors. So not just the physical risk factors, because everyone knows how to assess those, but it was around the psychological safety and the cultural risk and the consultation and co-design. So the strongest theme that came through in the feedback was around how the tool was like a really good educator, that it allowed them to reflect on their activity, and it really highlighted their own learning needs. And the commentary was, I realized what I needed to learn in a really non-judgmental, safe way. And a lot of it was around gaps in knowledge around cultural safety and how to develop cultural safe simulations and psychological safety. And a lot of people said, oh, I hadn't even really thought about where my simulation activities fit in the bigger picture and how it connects to other units or other programs, or so that curricular alignment and understanding, is my activity helping the learners scaffold their learning? Where does it sit? So it was actually some really great feedback, not only in supporting robust sim design, but it was a really good way to understand individuals' own learning needs. So that was really good. The negatives was quite long. The tour was quite long, which we completely agree, because we were using Qualtrics to sample data and there wasn't any kind of logic. So people could see the whole tool all at once, which could look a bit overwhelming. So we'll talk a little bit soon about next phases and what that would look like. But certainly we have a way forward to address that, which will be amazing. So the feedback, yeah, we were really happy with the feedback. If we can help educators not only create great, robust, safe simulation, but also address that gap of enhancing their own knowledge, then what a win.
Absolutely. And so, can I ask just another question of you? I'm going to fire them at you now, Mel. But what do you think? How do you think QSAFe actually promotes equity and inclusivity in simulation-based learning?
So I'd have to say there's, in existing standards, they talk about this and they support it really well. It is really generic, though. So important, but generic. And other people's or countries' cultural contexts are quite different to Australian and New Zealand. And even Australia and New Zealand are very, very different in regards to cultural context. So, for example, New Zealand has, a treaty, and so they have a lot of cultural support and structure. In Australia, we have over 250 different cultural nations, all who have different connections to their country, different customs. And so you can't just have one person's perspective. You've got to get broader perspective. And so this is the importance of consultation and co-design. It's really about understanding your context, and making simulations to support that.
And I guess that way the simulations are meaningful to individuals. When you designing any simulation, if it's applicable and meaningful, and you've got learners that are going to be engaged in it because they're going to get something out of it that applies to their real world practice.
And it's super important because when you look at accreditation standards across the board, no matter what discipline, it calls out, cultural elements and the inclusion of First Nations perspectives in what we do. It calls out simulation is a great learning tool to prepare our learners for practice, yet there is no tangible explanation of what that should look like and how it could be done. And that was a gap that we identified in the standards, not only from a general simulation perspective, but from a cultural perspective. Everyone was asking, well, how do we do this? We know we need to, but how do we do this? And so that's the goal of QSAFe as well, is this is a roadmap to help you do that, whether you're designing it or whether you want evidence for accreditation if you use the tool to benchmark.
So that was something in terms of if I'm being audited, my program's being audited, I'm putting things up for accreditation, then I've got this framework that says, look, these are the elements that we're including inside our simulation. I think this is, the transparency as well is really great when a framework like this exists. So in terms of, Mel, I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you because you speak so well. Where to from here? Before I go back, you mentioned there, like we've seen the end users we've had people that have actually used this and given us some feedback. And based on that, if you could just sort of summarize that, and then where to from here?
Yeah, so one thing we haven't said is to help people make this as simple as possible. What we have done in the back of the handbook is actually against each element in QSAFe, we have matrixed key standards relevant to context. So we've got one for Australia and one for New Zealand. And so the generic handbook matrix QSAFe to the Anaxel standards, to the ASPE standards, to the Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health curricula framework, and to national safety and quality standards, which is the accrediting standards within healthcare. Then what we've done is created a nursing and midwifery version of that, which we created for the pilot and end user feedback. So we've gone a step further, and then against each element in QSAFe, we have matrixed. So ANMAC, the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accrediting Council standards, the Nursing Midwifery Board of Australia standards, and for both nursing and midwifery. And then that was replicated in New Zealand for their particular standards. And so if you're benchmarking or designing simulation and you can clearly see if you've addressed that point, then you've also aligned that work with all these different standards. That's like immediate evidence for your accreditation. Like we can't, our goal was to help people and make it simple. And I think for me, that's one thing I'm super excited about. And our goal is this is not just for nursing and midwifery. So we want to work with other disciplines to create handbooks and matrices that are relevant to support their work as well. So that's one thing going forward. The other thing is we want to go web. So we're going to have our own website. The QSAFe will be, our goal is that it's freely available and it'll be in a digital format. So a lot of logic built in. And our goal is you can download the handbook in its entirety, or you can use it. Our goal is to have each element and link each element out to the relevant sections within the handbook to, again, make it as simple as possible. And each discipline-specific handbook and matrices would be on the site for different resources. So yeah, we want to go digital, Kerry.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, Mel, just in closing this today, if QSAFe were a metaphor,
Hmm?
what would it be and why?
Ah, I think it would be like having a best friend, Kerry, because it's going to give you honest feedback about your activity. And you might not like to hear it, but it's in your best interest.
So
Uh,
does it talk to me when you say it's going to give feedback, or is it
no,
a
that's just scary.
is it like a reflection? I go through and I think, oh wow, I actually haven't addressed this or I haven't addressed that. So
Yeah,
in essence, it's something that I can overlay on existing simulations or what I've been doing, and it almost like, oh my gosh, I now know why I
yeah,
was missing out on this or I hadn't included that. No wonder the learners were experiencing this and this. Or,
yeah,
wow, I just used Copilot. They were great. They developed up this simulation for me. But oops, Copilot didn't necessarily understand my learner needs or et cetera, et
yeah.
cetera. So
Context.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's we're not saying we don't like Copilot or
I
AI.
love a bit of co-pilot.
We yeah. In fact, you told me earlier that you divorced your husband. AI.
I may be in love with co-pilot. Anyway,
So I guess what I'm saying, there is so much risk now in that AI world where
yeah,
we can simplify and use that sort of those programs to develop up our simulations, but without necessarily having a framework like this to go through each element, there is a risk. So I love this has been such an exciting project to be involved in. And the fact of having things that are simplistic and easy to apply and easy to use is the answer for me as a someone experienced in simulation to hand over the reins to others. So I think it's great, and it's I'm excited to hear what our audience have to say once they get access to this and start using it.
yeah. Thanks, Kerry. And yeah, anyone interested? We're looking, I guess, for having little sub projects for different disciplines or different cultural contexts. So I guess, yeah, reach out.
So how do I reach out, Mel?
Oh, well, you could go to Simulation Happy Hour
Ah,
website and send us a message, or yeah, you can contact me or go to LinkedIn and leave a message for us there.
fantastic. All right. And Jenny Bassett isn't here today to ask us, but if you were anywhere in the world having your little cocktail now, where might it be and what would you be drinking?
Oh, Kerry, so many choices. I think I'd be like to be, well, I was going to say lying on a beach, but I'd really like to be sitting in a nice piazza in Italy drinking an espresso. What about you?
Oh, look, I'm just excited. I'm going to Antarctica soon, so I'd
Are
like to be
you?
in Antarctica drinking a hot chocolate with marshmallows and cream.
You kept that one to yourself.
Okay, so over and out from us, and thank you so much.
Thank you. See you next time.
Okay, bye.